Reuters has been told that Israel is at the moment conducting strikes across Syria, targeting air bases. Dozens of helicopters and planes have been destroyed, while much of the infrastructure on the bases has also been damaged. A Kamishli air base in northeast Syria, Shinzar base in the countryside of Hom, and Iqba Airport, southwest of the capital of Damascus, have all been hit. We are, I think, yet to get confirmation from Israel on this. Let's go to Zach Anders, who's a journalist who's in Syria, I think. You've made your way into Syria. Zach, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I have.
So you're in northeast Syria, are you, Zach?
I'm in the south. We came through Jordan. The roads into Damascus were kind of a no-go tonight, so we're holding out with some of probably the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life. These Syrians here are so kind. Met me at the border, connected through a friend through Jordan. These guys were fighting for their home, for their land. Their home that I'm in right now was destroyed and rebuilt in 2018. They're ecstatic. I mean, we are celebrating here all night tonight.
And how do they feel, Zach, about what might come next? The fall of Assad is worthy of celebration for a lot of Syrians. We can completely understand why. We've had messages from UK government officials to the same effect. But the question a lot of people are asking is what comes next? Can there be peace? Can there be more of a modern democracy in Syria?
You know, those are the same questions that we're talking about here tonight. Again, these are such wonderful hosts. I have tea and biscuits in my hand at every moment as we're talking about these things. They see a real window here. We've talked a lot about this kind of de facto movement leader at the moment, the one that has the most steam going into whatever comes next for Syria, just because he was the one military leader that was able to win independence from this Assad regime, Jolani. There is some hesitance about what he represents, but also we're talking about the fact that on Telegram today, some of the messages that are spreading around Syrian channels are that Jolani's telling the more radical elements, the more Islamic elements, that his movement does not include the full covering of women's faces, of the requirement of mandatory headwear. I know that's a very low bar. But for the initial messaging that's coming out to the Syrian people, these are the moments that are setting the groundwork for what comes next and what the Syrian people are going to come to expect. Now, certainly there could be some misdirection here, but the feeling right now is that there is, no matter what, a unity movement. And this is a population. The remarkable thing here is that there's one political party that has ruled this country, the Ba'ath Party, for 50 years. There's been one ruler, and every other leader that they've ever encountered in this bureaucracy has been a puppet of the Assad regime. The bureaucracy, though, has morphed into the people have assumed their own roles in this bureaucracy because it just didn't work for them. So they created their own. As we're driving through this area, they're pointing to me, the hospital. They say, Assad destroyed it. We rebuilt it. We brought in our own doctors. We taught our own nurses. We created that school. Do you see this mosque? We built this mosque. Do you see this school? We built this school. These are all things that the Syrian people here in the south are so proud of. And they took me on a tour to make sure that I saw what they have been building over these years. And they feel that in this moment, there should not be a scary transition. They're saying, don't worry if you're in the West and you think that Syria is going to look like the calamity it's looked like for years. They think this is a real opportunity for it to flourish under their own self-rule, because they say, we've been ruling ourselves. We've been helping each other. We know how to do that. And there's a lot more unity, even though we talk about the multiple factions, the multiple religions, the multiple ideas that dominate this country around from the north to the south. There's a Syrian unity, and they feel like that's not going to be a problem as they start to rebuild.
Okay, let's talk a little about Israel, because we've got a couple of lines coming out of the region this evening. One is that Reuters have been told that Israel has conducted further strikes across Syria, this time targeting air bases. Dozens of helicopters and planes have been destroyed. Much of the infrastructure bases was also damaged. We know that Israel was, targeting with chemical weapons in mind, trying to eradicate any threat from that perspective. What do you make of this, Zach?
We've talked about this as well, and I asked them, how do you feel to know that Israeli warplanes are over Syria right now, over our heads, and they're hitting places as we were driving in from one of the border checkpoints, we saw one of the explosions. I had no idea what to make of it. I had a hint and inclination that, Israel, we know they have the air superiority here and that they've been hitting these targets, but you see an explosion like that come out of nowhere. You don't know if it's an airstrike. And immediately they told me, no, that was one of Assad's bases. That's where we know that there are tanks and different weapons stored there, pieces of equipment. They're happy that those things are being destroyed, and they're happy. At least the small company that I'm with, I'll caveat, but the folks that I'm talking to say that they feel like most people down here in the South are not taking issue with what is taking place right now. We're talking about dozens of airstrikes all throughout the country. We're asking, do you have reports of civilian casualties in these strikes? Right now, it does not appear that there have been severe civilian casualties. There were 3 casualties earlier today, I'm told, from one of these Israeli strikes at one of these military bases. But the Israel conversation is one I'm very keen to hear about here. Obviously, they share a border. Israel is now inside Syrian territory. They've seized the other end of the Golan Heights. They're in the Mount Hermon area. There's no clue when Israeli troops, how long they plan to stay. Is that really on most Syrians' radars right now? They feel like they're not taking issue with destroying Assad's equipment. In
Yeah.
fact, they're going to be the ones that are out there just trying to destroy some of this equipment too, because those conversations that we're having is, again, there's too many players involved, and there's been too much imperialistic movement here. Turkey, Iran, they don't want this equipment falling into any other big powers' hands, so they'd rather just see it destroyed.
So Syrians would feel that Israel is on their side, helping to protect them.
Wouldn't go that far. I
Okay.
certainly wouldn't go that
Okay.
far. But in
I
this
wanted to know where the
moment,
boundary was, but okay, fine.
yeah, of course.
All right. So, look, you mentioned the Golan Heights, formerly Syrian territory. It's been occupied by Israel for 57 years. Israel Prime Minister has spoken this evening. He's hailed the collapse of Assad's regime in Syria, says it's a direct result of the strong blows that we've delivered to Hamas, Hezbollah and Iran. Said Iran had spent billions of dollars keeping Assad in power, called Syria under its former president a forward post of Iranian terror. And he's defended Israel's seizure of that demilitarized zone in the occupied Golan Heights. But the US has made it clear that this will be time limited. So there's a little warning here, just very briefly, Zach, from the United States, that this is time limited. This demilitarized buffer zone in Golan Heights will not be a permanent thing.
And I'm stressing through my Israeli sources that this moment is going to have a lot of weight on the perception of the Syrian people towards Israel going forward, and not communicating a timeline here, not putting in a clear, once there is a new government, once there is a new army in place or a new security solution, that we will withdraw. We didn't necessarily hear that language from the Prime Minister Netanyahu. Doesn't put an end date. You've got, again, those ultra-nationalist figures inside the Israeli government who are saying we should stay and we should stay for good. So that's the concerning element here. And that's some territory that Israel would certainly like to hold, just defensively. It was not if you go back in the history of 1974, when they essentially firmed up that border and decided how far apart Syrian and Israeli forces were going to be in this area, it wasn't like Israel got everything they wanted in that moment, as far as the topography, the land there. So that's something we'll pay very close attention to going forward. But this could be a window now where elections might not be close. They could be months away. They could be more than a year away before anything like that is really finalized. So we could see the Israeli troops stationed there for months, maybe more than a year, maybe even longer.
Okay, look, Zach, thank you so much for speaking to us. Currently in Syria, in the south, outside Damascus, roads are blocked, or he's unable to get into Damascus, but he's in Syria there, staying with some wonderful hosts and really getting a sense of how that nation is feeling under the fall of Assad. Thank you very much, Zach Anders there.